the table where we're going to build this thing. Here's the case. I bolted it back together. I torqued the 6 main studs down to 24 foot-pounds. The Bentley book said 24 to 26, so I went on the lower end because all that I've read and saw online, if you shine a light down the mains and you see light through it, the case is useless. So with it bolted together, I'm going to try to put the camera in the opening with a light behind it, and we will see if okay. That's on the first. Oh wait. Get in there. All I see is darkness. Alright. So this will be the main, the center main. Darkness. Oh, freaking hand stuck in the hole. Alright, and let's try this last one. There's a bit of shininess, but it's not light. It's just part of the case. So at least that test is showing okay. I did inspect the case pretty thoroughly. Although there is some wear, this baby must have saw some water or something. It seems solid enough to build what I'm going to try doing. Again, this is just a, can't say it enough, just kind of a trial run. So we'll open it up, we'll look at it a little further, and then we're going to start setting up the mill to start boring those holes. I think I'm going to remove all of the studs so I can mount it flush on this, and then check to make sure that the bores are square with the tool. I don't know if this is a thing, but the crank, the bores may not have been bored out directly straight with the crank. So I want to check that out, make sure. If those are off on an angle, then I'm going to have to shim my mount on the mill to compensate for that. Hopefully it'll work. I don't know. This is a learning experience. So everything looks good on the outside, but you can see, you know, there's some deterioration of the magnesium. Especially down here, so we definitely know it was sitting on the floor like that. Behind number 3 looks good. So I'm going to charge up the battery, take it apart, take another look, set up the mill, start cutting this sucker. Alright, YouTube, I spent about, I don't know, I would say the last hour taking measurements off of everything. You know, I'm determining the feasibility of this, whether this is rebuildable case, rebuildable parts. Getting these parts just randomly in a box and hoping everything works. You know, I'm trying to, you know, it's kind of fun determining why this engine was actually being rebuilt in the first place, and I don't think it was a low end problem or a bottom end problem. It must have been leaking oil from somewhere, or worn rings, loss of horsepower, or they just wanted to freshen it up. Because what I did was take a bunch of measurements. See if we can get this in focus. What I did was, I have these pistons and jugs from AA. No way, I got one sitting out right here. 91.95. They're 92 millimeter thick wall. You can see how thick that wall is. Cylinders. So I went and I measured each piston to try getting some sort of balance. My scale only reads in pounds. So I took the piston, put it on the scale with the pin, 1.164. Actually, what piston is this? Look at that, I'm already mismeasuring. I might have to go back through, but so what I did is I converted it to grams. 1.164 is 527.98152 grams, which is the lightest of the pistons. The heaviest came in at 529.79. So to balance it, I'm going to have to take a little bit off of 2 and 3 to match this. Of course, I'm going to remeasure the weight again before I start grinding on things, but I'll get the pistons. Then I weighed the rods, which I don't have the proper tool to weigh the big end and the little end. So being stock rods, I just threw them on the scale to see what they came in at. I got 1.346 pounds, which is 610.53 grams. 2 of them matched up, and then the other 2 were heavy. So I could take these 2, take off 2 thousandths of a pound to meet here, but 2 thousandths of a pound actually comes into just a little less than a gram. So I think I could get it closer than that, just to balance it and see what happens. So then I went in and basically measuring the rods. I just put it on the scale and measured it. Simple. So then I measured the piston pins, the diameter, because again, I don't know if these rods are used, reconditioned, what's going on with them. So all 4 of these came out to the exact diameter of 0.8411 inches. So how I did that is I've got my Starrett micrometer, and I would measure each one, and they each came out the same. So that's my piston pin diameter. Then I used my Starrett inside bore gauge, and I would stick it in here, get that diameter, and then go over to the mic and mic it out just like that. Okay, and that's how I was getting these diameters, because I don't know the tolerances. I don't know if it's okay to have a thousandth of an inch, a half a thousandth of an inch, 3/1000ths of an inch. You know, I don't know. The book just basically says if you push it through with your fingers, it's okay. I mean, I don't know what that means, so I'm just getting measurements for my own purposes, because I know my measurements are fairly accurate, because we got the pin at 8411, number 4 measured out at 8410, number 3 8412. So that's a half a thousandths difference, plus and minus. So that's bigger, that's smaller. And if I come over here and I take the piston pin into rod number 3, that's number 3. I mean, it's a tight fit, but it fits in there. I mean, there's no play. I mean, that is pretty nice. Okay, but then I go to number 4, and she won't go. I mean, she needs a little finagling. I mean, that is, so that half a thousandths difference is causing it not to go in there. Which, I mean, I guess it's a good thing or a bad thing, because we know it's a tight tolerance. The other two were a bit bigger, but not by much. So we have less than a thousandths on number 1, and then exactly 1/1000ths on number 2. So there's a thousandths, which on a circumference that would be a half a thousandths on each side or all the way around. I think, personal opinion, I think that's okay. I mean, a half a thousandths gap is good, allows oil. That's pretty tight. Number 4 is obviously way too tight. So I'm gonna figure out a way to make that bigger, but what that tells me is that those are usable. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but this is my guesstimation here doing this. And I don't even know if that's a word, guesstimation, but hell, it works in this case. So I'm thinking the rods are okay to use. Alright, you know, I weighed the main bearings, but I don't know what the weight of the main bearings have anything to do with anything. But what I did was I measured the thrust. Okay, and on the case, which would be this area right here, I measured that. And I just as an example to see how accurate my gauges are, I used a Mitutoyo digital caliper, which came out to 21.97 millimeters. Okay, which didn't really make sense to me, so I grabbed the Starrett mic, and it came out to 22.052, which is supposed to be 22 millimeters exactly, which tells me, you know, it's 52 thousandths wear on there. Now when I put the bearing in there, the bearing fits nice. Okay, so then I moved to the lifters and the lifter bores, because I took a lifter, actually I took a few lifters, 3 of them, and these lifters aren't any good. They are completely flat and even almost concave on the top when they should have a dome. So they're not any good, but I just used them for, they're stock Volkswagen, I used them for the width. and averaging out 3, they averaged out to 0.7467 on the mic. Okay, so then I did the same technique as I did on the rods, and I used the Starrett, I don't know where I put it, oh right here, the little Starrett bore gauge. Stuck it in there. Similar like this. Got it around, got her straight. Locked it. Okay. So I gave me my bore. Came over here. Again. Mic'd it. Okay. I did that to all of them. You know, I've seen things on YouTube. You stick it in there, and if it slides in fairly snug, but it still rotates, it's good. I didn't know if this rotates too much or slides, because there's a slight little wiggle there. So I don't know if that's good. That's why I measured it. But when I went down to this one seemed like it had a little more wiggle. So now that's raising a red flag. Is that too much wiggle? You know, if anyone knows out there, let me know, because really I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, just trying to figure out what's what and what's too much. I'm not building a race motor here. I'm just trying to learn how to build a motor. So the measurements came out for the lifter bore. Okay, for that would be number 1, and then I marked them as I went down with dots. So number 4 came out to 0.7484, which is a difference of 1,000 or 0.0017 of an inch. So if I divided that in half, that would give me the gap between the side of this and the wall, which is pretty small. We're in the half thousandths there. It's less than a thousandth. It's 0.85, or it's 85 of a thousandths. So the biggest one in question was number 4, which came out to 7508, or 41 thousandths. Okay, so half of that is, there's a 2 thousandths, you know, in 05. The 05 is so puny, but say 2 thousandths gap between this and the wall. That's the worst one. Again, I'm gonna have to do some research. Is that too much? Is that enough? Or is that intolerance? It seems like it might be, but that was the measuring I did on that. I examined the case closely, and you know, the condition of it seems pretty good. Everyone says, well, you got to get it line bored, but I don't know. And so I started measuring the journals, because they say, well, if you could feel it, get it line bored. These are perfectly smooth. This first one, second one, and that one. The one in the middle, I could just feel something. You can almost see it. You can see it, as a matter of fact. Let's see if I can. Now, I'm assuming that means I need it line board. Not sure, because I don't know. I mean, I would assume I do because that's what everyone says. So I went over here. I have my digital height gauge with a Mitutoyo gauge that reads, let's see if that'll focus, in half thousandths. I mean, we're talking, I mean, the fan was on and this thing was moving. So you can kind of see it. Maybe you can't, maybe that's me shaking, but you can, you know, it's pretty sensitive, pretty. So I went that, and it did bump, took a spin. So I said, all right, well, we're probably beyond half thousandths. And I set this one up, and I have it on, look at this, I have it on a granite surface plate, which was calibrated, I don't know, a few years ago, but I mean, I don't think it's bad, and you know, I don't think it went out of whack or anything happened to it. I mean, it's a piece of stone. So this is a surface plate that's perfectly flat, you know. And how I would do it is I took the gauge and I would slide it across to see just that little spot, because I don't have this level perfectly level. I was just trying to see how much this would bump up when it hit it, to see if it would bump, and it did. So I had this one set up, which reads in thousandths, and I go, see that difference, and it came out to about 1 thousandths and a half. I don't know if I'm pronouncing all the thousandths and all that right, but it moved 1.5 spot, or 1.5 lines. So 1 thousandths and a half. Now, is that enough to justify a line bore? I don't know. I mean, possibly. I mean, the case does not look worn here. I mean, everything looks like it's in good shape in here, although it's still a bit dirty. I mean, that was just the initial clean. But in all honesty, I think I'm going with it. I think I'm just going to put it together. I'm going to think about it, do some research. I'm going to, whether this case is good or not, I'm still going to bore out the cylinders, just so I can learn how to do that, run the mill, chew this case up a little bit for bigger cylinders, to get that done. And who knows, that may go completely wrong and I destroy this case, and at that point it doesn't matter. So I'm not going to get a line board before I do the machining on it. So that's where we're at. If you know anything about these tolerances or where I can find them, please let me know. I mean, I could be completely off whack here and this thing is shot, or I could be good. I mean, I could be good to go. I don't know. So if you know, let me know. I appreciate you watching. If there's any other measurements you think I should take, let me know that too. But I'm thinking, if I was to guesstimate, I'm thinking I'm okay. You know, at least for my particular purposes of building a relatively stock motor with bigger jugs. Nothing super high performance. And I really don't care if it lasts a long time, because this is just learning for me. So I don't want to spend I want to spend next to nothing to do it, which I have a bunch of parts around. I was figuring I'd put it together and see what happens. So if I'm off base, let me know. If not, I'm gonna go with it. And I appreciate you watching, and I will bring you back when we start hogging out some hole.